Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
The insinuations were there, and at times it was even a little more intense, that if I wanted to get further up the OT levels, I was going to have to either get him on board or you're going to have to look at not being married to him. Those words were not used, but it was definitely insinuated. I will say that there was a very weird situation that occurred when I was touring. I think it would be like the props or set design fabrication area, like a warehouse. And I was just getting a tour around and they're pointing out things. Okay, here's so-and-so here. Hi, hi, hi. And then all of a sudden, everything went quiet, like silent, in this big workshop. And then I heard the footsteps, the stormtroopers. And in the middle of the stormtroopers was Mr. Miscavige, walking through, doing a tour and trying to figure out what's going on. And he looked and took notice of me and said, "Who the hell is she and why is she here?"
There's a report he sent up to RTC.
Mm-hmm.
So the chances are that he knew who you were and he knew you were there, but he was giving the people. But he still did that because he's that kind of person that wants to keep everybody, like he would walk in there and pretend like he didn't know who it was, because believe me, that kind of information nobody got up there.
He must have.
And then he just gave the.
But I didn't know that he knew, and I just got scared instantly. I was like,
oh. Yeah, he could be an intimidating person in a small package, but I'm sure he said like, "What's she doing here?" Like, yeah, he was trying to make everybody unsettled. So that's so typical. I saw that happen so many times. Like he walked into the hole. Not to interrupt your story, we'll get back to it. When he had all those people in the hole, right? And he was beating them every day and humiliating them. And a couple of people told the story about how Dave came in and he said, "Hey, I just got off the phone with Tom. And Tom asked me if he wants me to come up there and punch you guys in the face for me." Okay. Like that never happened. He was never had a conversation with Tom Cruise about punching people in the face. But yeah, they're never going to be able to side check the story.
Right.
And they're all.
You can't verify anything.
Yeah. And it's intimidating as all hell. So, you know.
Yeah. So that was how I felt, was like, wait a second. I got clearance. I paid the money to get the sec checks to get up here to help you. And then here comes Miscavige saying, "Who the hell is she and why is she here?"
It's
but
weird.
He must have known.
It's weird.
It is weird.
You were married to someone for over 26 years that was never a Scientologist and never had any desire to be a Scientologist. So tell me, what was it like to manage that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I definitely broke all the rules, you could say. Back when I first met him, of course, I had the idea that, oh, well, he's so successful and he's wonderful and he's everything I could ever imagine. I'll have him on the bridge in no time. That really was something that I thought. And then as time progressed and we talked about it, I mean, it was a very sort of different situation for me to come out with it and just explain to him how involved I really was and how diehard I really was. And I would slip him little things like, "Well, try this," little bits of Hubbard technology. And he would say, "Oh, you know, that's interesting." Or I'd say, "Hey, you should read this chapter in this book." And he'd say, "Well, you can explain things to me." But it was very obvious from the very start that he just was not interested. And so, and yet we had this wonderful marriage, this wonderful relationship. He's super supportive. I helped him with his work and his career. We did a lot of work together at times. And his viewpoint was just that, hey, if this makes you happy, I'll help you make it happen. And so he definitely contributed largely, financially especially, in paying for tens and tens of thousands of dollars worth of auditing and courses for me. And even to the point where, again, 26 years is quite a while. And we're still very, very, very strong. He's very proud of me now where I am, to be honest. He's kind of like, woo, I'm so glad to see you free of this. But to manage that was, it was tricky. It was very, very tricky within the organizations, because of course they were constantly hounding me to get him into the organization and on course doing something, because here I am as an OT4, a class 6, married to a complete non-Scientologist. I had 3 stepchildren, and we have a child between us as well. And so not only was there pressure from the organization to get him on board, but also all the kids. That was very difficult for me. It caused problems for me. But because of how long I had been in, my whole life basically, they didn't want to create any ultimatums per se, but it was definitely evident. The insinuations were there, and at times it was even a little more intense, that if I wanted to get further up the OT levels, I was going to have to either get him on board, or you're going to have to look at not being married to him. Those words were not used, but it was definitely insinuated.
So you felt the organization was intervening in your marriage to put pressure on you to get your husband into Scientology, using the leverage that you would not be allowed to progress further in Scientology if you didn't do that.
That's right. Especially onto OT7. Yes. Like I was told flat out by one director of processing that you will not get onto OT7 until he is online. That was definitely told to me at one point.
And by onlines, you mean actively pursuing Scientology and identifying himself as a Scientologist?
Actively doing some sort of courses, moving up the bridge to total freedom, as they say. Yes. And then, of course, another person tells me, oh, that's not true. And I said, where is this in writing? Anywhere? Can anyone give me a reference for this? This is really confusing to me. And I think they just didn't want to admit that there's no chance I would make it to flag with a complete non-Scientologist husband and family. That was the reality. Yeah, so it was very difficult. And that went on and off. The pressure was on and off for years. And there was no way I was ever going to consider that. But I just pushed that idea aside, like, oh, they don't mean it. Oh, no, it won't be a problem. I'll make it happen. I'll make it go right. But it was definitely a real situation, yes. Very frustrating. It was convert or get out, really.
I can understand that he's proud of you. And if you saw the comments from part 1 and part 2, I'm sure you're aware that there's a lot of people that are very proud of you.
It took a while for me to get to this point where I was willing to talk with anyone publicly. I'm very happy I'm doing it. But yes, it's nice to have a good reception. It's wonderful.
What about the kids? How'd they do with the whole thing?
I was very much involved in their upbringing. I'm on good terms with their mom and all that, but very much involved from a young age on all 3 of them. And again, I was trying to push Delphi. I was trying to push study tech. I was trying to push ethics tech or sneak it in here or there, try to get them on course. And a couple of them did dabbled in a couple of introductory courses. One of them even did their PIRF. But again, none of them bit. And it was actually kind of shocking to me, because having been a born in, I always had the idea that, oh, it's just so easy to get people to be interested.
Right.
And so when they weren't, it was like, I was like, how could this possibly be that you don't get it? But that is where that being a born in might be different. And plus they were children. And so looking back, I feel a little embarrassed, and I've actually apologized to all of them for doing that to them, making them feel like they had to do this for me, or because she says it's a good idea. And so I apologized to all of them. And now, of course, they all said, hey, don't worry about it. It's fine. We totally understand where you're coming from. You meant well, etc. But no, I lucked out in that one too. All of them wanted nothing to do with it. So yes, and I'm actually the last one out in my family, my whole entire family.
Wow.
Yeah, I was the stalwart, the hang in there girl. Yes. There was many attempts by other family members who had long been out to try to get me out, and I would hear none of it. Absolutely. The wall would come down.
So at some point, it all starts falling apart for you. You're born into Scientology, you're raised in Scientology, you become a highly trained auditor, you're an OT, but something happens and it all starts falling apart.
Well, I will say, going back to what we were talking about earlier with this this divisiveness within, or the attempt to divide my family, that really bothered me, especially my marriage. So that was the initial part that started getting me to think a little bit and take a couple of steps back. And then over time, there were just oddities that would occur, whether it be on course or I would notice some particular staff member being mistreated or disappear altogether, and you couldn't find out where they went or what happened to them. I didn't like it. There were so many little weird mysteries and things that just started to bother me. But at the time, I kind of wrote them off. I justified them and figured out, it's not a big deal, or I'm sure it's fine, that sort of thing. But when enough of them start to stack up, it got me thinking. We moved from LA to Florida about 5 years ago. So that gave me some space away from the intensity of how LA can be, particularly the advanced orgs and the focus on the public in Los Angeles. So I got a little bit of a break from that. Of course, when I got here, I joined the OT committee, which is the operating Thetan committee. It's like the public little group that tries to get people moving in Scientology in their local area. And of course, I was doing extension courses as well. But there was that space that was created. And then in March of 2020, I made a trip back to Los Angeles to do a simple, what I thought was going to be a simple 12.5 hours, or what they call an intensive of Scientology counseling, just a simple cleanup. And I was kind of excited about doing it. There had been a lot of stuff going on with the move and all that. And I thought, well, this would be nice. It turned out to be not so nice at all. And I was misled. That one simple action turned into 5 intensives of auditing, tens of thousands of dollars. And it also happened to be March of 2020 when COVID came around. And so here I am in Los Angeles. And I got to tell you, it was truly got to the point of what I would consider not only coercive control, but mentally abusive to me. I wanted to leave. I told them that I had a very limited time and very limited money. Now, granted, obviously, I could have straight up walked out the door. I could have done that. But as a technically trained person, and they knew that, they used that to manipulate me to fork over more money and stay way past what I was agreed to. Well, when you're getting towards the end of one of these chunks of counseling that you've purchased, when you get towards the end, they call you in for an interview. So I was called in for this interview, and I was told, you're low on hours. And I said, well, I'm not doing anymore. I can't. I already told you guys, I can't do anymore. And this happened 3 or 4 times, mind you. But then I would get this. I would get told, well, you are a Class 6 auditor. You do realize that per Hubbard technology, you cannot leave in the middle of an action that you're midway on. You know that. It's your responsibility to do the next thing, whatever that takes, however you can figure that out. And I would, you know, at first I would say, well, I have got to go. I have to go. And I was basically in one of these meetings, the director of processing looked at me and said, well, you're not going. And even though I wasn't physically chained to the desk, I felt like if I left, I was signing off on ever being allowed back into the organization. I took it that seriously that I have got to figure this out. I am stuck here until I get through this. And also with COVID going on too, I wondered if I could even get on a plane to get out of there. So I had these two forces sitting on top of me. And that again was another one of those big chinks in the armor for me, because it started me thinking, what am I doing involved in a group where I'm upset? I feel like I've been lied to. I'm worried that I can't go about living my life the way I want to. I can't go where I want to be. I can't leave. I felt trapped. And it didn't dawn on me until I actually did leave finally, that I felt free. I felt free after leaving. And that's the opposite of what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to feel freer when you're doing Scientology, not free when you're out of Scientology. And I felt free. And that really kind of sunk in with me. And it wasn't long after that when I had a couple of conversations with some family that helped me really see the light. And then from there, once I decided that it was okay to look, and I started watching television shows, watching movies, going clear. I read literally over 80 books and articles, or listened to books on audiobooks. I found books in other languages online and printed them out. I found everything I could possibly find. And when I started realizing all the lies, the amazing amount of lies and falsities that I'd lived and believed my whole life, I had to know the truth. And I was a crazy person for about a year and a half. That's all I could do with my free time, was find out the truth of what this group was, who L. Ron Hubbard really was. And there was no going back after that for me at all, none. So it was September of 2021 when I had a couple of family members, a brother and my mom, have a talk with me in person where they divulged a couple of those truths I mentioned earlier in the interviews. And that's when I started to think, you know, I think I'm done with this group. I'm done. I was completely fearful of what that meant. I didn't know what that meant to me. But I had decided somehow that my spiritual future was not dependent upon this lying group. So once that fear was gone, then it just became a matter of, well, what do I do with this idea now? That's when I fervently got into the reading and the understanding and the listening. And then I discovered YouTube. I had never even watched YouTube before. And so I was a lurker for a long time.
So how did you move forward after making that decision?
All right. I was out of town visiting when I had this epiphany, and I returned back home. I told my husband in no uncertain terms that I was done with it. He was cautiously joyful, I will say that. He had done a very good job of not revealing that attitude towards me, because he knew that wouldn't have gone over too well. But bless his heart, he was very, very pleased. A giant sigh of relief on his end. And then I just became, as I said earlier, I just became very dogged about reading everything I could read, watching everything I could watch. Right. I was so paranoid in the beginning. I thought they could hack my HBO account. I literally was that paranoid. I thought maybe they could figure out how to get into my computer. I even would like close the blinds when I was reading a book just in case somebody would drive by. I mean, I was very, very paranoid.
Right, right. And you hadn't even, but you hadn't spoken out. You hadn't even said
no,
anything.
no. But I don't know what they know, you know. And I also was on the OT committee. I had to figure out how to get out of that. I was a Criminon supervisor for 12 years, so I had to figure out how to get out of that without raising any feathers. So I was cautiously backing out. So that probably lent itself a little bit to the fear factor there. But all I wanted to do was find out what really happened all the way from back in the early 50s all the way through. I wanted to understand what happened, the truth of what happened, so that I could understand how I fell into it, or what parts of it, why did I believe what I believed? And there's a lot of turmoil that goes on. How do you believe in anything anymore? Or should I believe in anything anymore? All these wild questions come up. And I am in therapy. Something that then I figured, oh my gosh, what if they find out that I saw a therapist? Not that I would ever go back, but I just figured they had their fingers in my life. And that was all largely just in my mind. But that's how I lived my whole life. They were always in my life some way. So it was hard to imagine that they're not anymore. And to this day, they're not completely out of my life. Oh, I get random phone calls, or I get emails, or I get text messages from various people still within the group. And when I say, I'm not talking about Scientologist friends of mine. I'm talking about staff members who want to get a hold of me.
Now, Julie, you did something that I consider very brave, very admirable. You took it upon yourself to send a letter of resignation to the church. And I want the audience to understand why this is so important. Because by law in this country, consent belongs to the individual. When you sign up for Scientology and you sign those forms, you're giving up your consent. And if you don't take it back, like officially, literally take it back and cancel their having your consent, it could be a problem for you in the future. So I want to hear about how you did that.
Well, I had read a few things that other people had written, but I wanted to go straight for the jugular. And again, regarding those contracts that we all initial and sign all throughout the courses and the different services we do, if you take a minute to even stop and start reading those, they're going to ask you why you're doing that. You're not allowed to really read those as you're not. You get in trouble for asking a question about them. So you sign your consent away, just like you said. So I decided to write a letter. I wrote a few of them, and I sent them out simultaneously last December. So it's only been about 2.5 months since I wrote these. I sent one to Advanced Organization Los Angeles. I sent one to Flag. I sent one to Celebrity Center International. I sent one to American Saint Hill Organization Los Angeles. And I sent one to Religious Technology Center. So I sent 5 out. They all say the same thing. I'll read it to you if you'd like.
Please.
Okay. And I put attention to the HCO division, which is in charge of ethics and personnel, basically. To whom it may concern, my name is Julie McKernan, a.k.a. Julie Walker, maiden name. This letter serves as notice that I hereby resign my membership from the Church of Scientology. I am no longer a Scientologist and do not want to be referred to as such. This resignation also includes any membership of all subsidiaries. I am no longer a member of the International Association of Scientologists. I want no further contact from anyone working within Scientology. I will no longer be bound by any ecclesiastical agreements or policies of RTC, CSI, or any subsidiary of the group known as the Church of Scientology. Please remove me from any and all mailing lists. I want these wishes added to all my files as well. Any failure to do so may constitute harassment. Julie McKernan. It's quite a few months ago. I think it was after I had really figured out how many lies Mr. Hubbard had told about his own life, and how I was just extremely upset at that whole concept. And I just kept thinking about the years and the thousands and thousands of hours and all the roller coaster ride of getting up the bridge and all the ethics handlings and all the stuff that I was put through. And I had kept all my commendations, all my certificates, all my invitations, most all of my receipts as well. I had fat file, all my ethics KRs, copies that I ended up with. I had them all in a filing cabinet. And one Saturday afternoon, I said to my husband, I said, I don't want these in the house anymore. Oh, I also had every book you can think of, pretty much, plus all the advanced clinical course lectures, all the Congress's lectures. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of lectures as well. So I took all my books and all my lectures and I bagged them up in black plastic bags and put them out to the curb. The reason I put them in black bags is because I didn't want anybody to see them and accidentally pick one up and take it and start reading it. So I made sure they were sealed up in black bags and tossed right into the truck. I watched them go in the truck. Nice. And then I went back and I grabbed my shredder, my shredding machine, and I put it on the ground. And I went to my filing cabinet and I grabbed all my files and files and files of everything. And I sat there and I shredded every success story, every certificate I earned, every KR that I wrote or had one written on me that I had a copy of. I shredded all my receipts and including my invitation cards to OT 1, 2, and 3. All gone. Completely gone. The only thing I think I still have left in my house is that Mission into Time book that I showed. Right. And the only reason I have that is for posterity because my mom was on it. Yeah, it was an amazing feeling. I ended up, I literally burst into tears. Half of it was joyful tears and half of it was just this letting go. Because every time I would shred one, I would think of where I was, how I felt at the time, and how the promises of what those things were supposed to give me, the abilities that I was supposed to gain. I would look at the certificate and go, I didn't get any. No, they don't work. Shred. So it was a long weekend, but they're all gone now. And it was a great feeling. And sure, I'd love to have those pictures up if anyone's interested. Pretty wild time.
Congratulations, Julie. Congratulations for surviving all of that. I mean, I know you went through a lot. Walking away from that, it's like walking away from your entire life and your identity. So really, congratulations. And thanks for reaching out to me and asking for my help and telling your story. It was greatly appreciated. I was so happy to do it. But I have one last question before we go. So if you were talking to somebody that was sort of still in Scientology, maybe had a foot out, wasn't sure what to do, what would you say to them? Or what would you say to someone who is in, if you had an opportunity to try and share your experience with them and try to help them, choose a new path? What would you say to them?
It's a very, very good question, and everyone's life is different. I struggled with the idea of for quite a while. I just wanted to be quiet. I didn't want to lose a lot of friends. There's a lot of friends. Yes, I am very fortunate that my family is all out. I was the black sheep. I was the last one. So I do realize that. And the reason that I decided to finally speak out, well, one thing, I sent these letters and they're still bugging me. So that didn't work. So I thought, fine, I'm gonna say something. But my intention in saying something has nothing to do with the group of Scientology, the church, quote unquote. I want others, because when I was going through the time of discovering all the lies and discovering what the truth was, these videos helped me so much to know that I wasn't alone, Even if I wasn't outspoken, I wasn't alone. That helped me so much, along with all the books and all that. So if I can just help one person to feel a little bit stronger, knowing that you're not alone, I'm just beginning to learn of the support that is out here. And I've been out, so to speak. I'm not a former staff or Sea Org, but I still feel like I came out of something. And the support is incredible. In your own time, if I could talk to someone directly, in your own time, you'll know. That's how I felt. I'll know when the time is right. And I did. I knew it was time for me to come out and say something. Because now I'm on to the next adventure. What else can I do with this knowledge now? Who else can I help? How can I help? And this was the only way for me to get to that point, was to just go ahead and make myself known. And I'm really glad I did. Thank you, Mitch, very much.
And thank you for reaching out to me to ask me to help you tell your story. We're all looking forward to hearing from you again. Until then, take care.